The diner sat where Route 9 died into desert, a grease-stained monument to better decades. Betty's place, the faded sign promised, though Betty herself had been dead since Carter left office. The coffee tasted like burnt rubber, and the pie crust could double as roofing shingle, but truckers stopped because the next gas station was 40 miles deeper into nothing. The waitress who worked the morning shift moved between tables like a ghost rehearsing old patterns, her smile a mask she'd learned to wear without thinking about the muscles required. Ellen Wilder was 36 but looked a decade older under the fluorescent lights. Life had carved lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide anymore. Not that she bothered trying most days. 3 years since David died in a T-bone collision on Highway 50, drunk driver who walked away without a scratch. She'd raised Lily alone since, then working doubles when she could get them sleeping 4 hours a night, dreaming in coffee orders and table numbers. The bracelet on her left wrist caught the morning sun through the window, a thin silver chain with a heart-shaped charm that seemed too delicate for her chapped hands. She'd bought 2 of them for Lily's 16th birthday matching set from a jewelry store in Reno that let her make payments over 6 months. One for her daughter, one for herself, so they'd always be connected no matter how many hours Ellen spent away from home. Lily never took hers off. Neither did Ellen, even when the clasp snagged on dish towels or the metal left green marks on her skin in summer. November 5th came in cold, the kind of morning where your breath crystallized and the desert floor looked like it had been dusted with powdered sugar. Ellen had been on shift since 5, serving breakfast to a rotation of familiar faces who never learned her name. The cook was hungover again, moving slower than usual, burning eggs and cursing under his breath. Donna, the other waitress, had called in sick with what was probably another fight with her husband disguised as flu. So Ellen worked both sections, carrying plates on each arm, refilling coffee cups before they hit empty, her feet screaming inside shoes with soles worn smooth as river stones. 6:47, the rumble started, distant as summer thunder. Motorcycles. Not the weekend warrior types with their shiny Harleys and leather costumes, but the real thing. Heavy bikes that sounded like they'd tear themselves apart if they stopped moving, engines tuned for highways and long nights. Ellen felt the vibration through the floor before she saw them, 6 machines rolling into the parking lot in a line so precise it looked choreographed. Chrome caught the early light and the riders dismounted with the kind of synchronized economy that spoke to years riding together. The diner went quiet. Truckers looked up from their plates, hands moving unconsciously towards cell phones or the door. The cook peered through the kitchen window, then disappeared back to his grill. Ellen stood behind the counter with the coffee pot in her hand, watching through the glass as 6 men in leather vests walked toward the entrance like they owned the ground beneath their boots. Iron Crossing MC, the patches on their backs declared in letters big enough to read from 30 feet. No cartoon skulls or flames, just the words, and a simple cross design. The man who led them was built like a concrete pillar, 6'3" and 240 gray beard that hadn't seen a razor in months. Scars visible, even from a distance, one running down his left cheek like someone had tried to split his face and given up halfway. His vest carried a patch that read President in smaller letters above the club name. They took the corner booth, moving with the kind of silence that unnerved Ellen more than if they'd been loud. The president sat facing the door, back to the wall, eyes scanning the room in a pattern that suggested he'd done this in 100 other diners across 100 other mornings. His brothers flanked him, 3 on one side, 2 on the other, and not one of them smiled. Ellen grabbed menus and walked over her heart, doing things it hadn't done since the first time she'd approached David's hospital bed and seen the machines breathing for him. She recited the specials without enthusiasm, her voice flat from repetition. 6 orders for black coffee, nothing else. She nodded and turned to leave, making it 3 steps before the president's voice stopped her. The words came out low and rough like gravel being poured over metal, and they made no sense at first. Ellen froze with the coffee pot still in her hand, the world narrowing down to just his voice and the sudden hammering in her chest. Before anyone could process what was happening, his hand shot across the table and caught her wrist, not hard, but firm enough that she couldn't pull away without making it a fight. The diner went from quiet to dead silent. Ellen stared at him, at the gray eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine, at the scarred knuckles wrapped around her arm, at the way every other person in the room had suddenly become an audience. His thumb brushed over the bracelet, the silver chain catching light between them. The question repeated itself, quieter this time, but no less intense. Ellen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her lips formed words that died before reaching sound. The coffee pot trembled in her other hand. The man's jaw tightened. He released her wrist slowly, deliberately, and leaned back in the booth without breaking eye contact. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Those bracelets come in pairs," he said. "Matching. I've seen them before. Where's the other one?" Ellen's hand flew to the bracelet, covering it like she could hide what he'd already seen. The cafe spun around her faces, blurring into shapes without meaning. She wanted to lie, to say she didn't understand, to walk away and pretend this conversation had never started. But something in the president's eyes told her he already knew she was about to break. "My daughter Ellen," whispered the words, scraping out of her throat like broken glass. "She has it." The present tense hung in the air for exactly 2 seconds before Ellen's face crumpled, and the truth came pouring out in a voice that didn't sound like hers anymore. She had it. She had it. Past tense. 3 weeks past tense. The bikers didn't move. The president's expression remained carved from stone, but something shifted behind his eyes, a recognition that seemed to pain him. He gestured to the empty space beside him in the booth, an invitation that felt more like a command. Ellen shook her head, still holding the coffee pot like a weapon or a shield. One of the other bikers, an older man with silver hair and tattoos crawling up his neck, spoke for the first time. His voice carried the kind of authority that suggested he'd given orders in another life, maybe still did. "Ma'am, you're going to want to sit down for this conversation." Ellen looked around the diner. The truckers were pretending not to watch while watching everything. The cook had abandoned the grill entirely. Through the kitchen window, she could see him on his phone, probably calling someone. Maybe the police, maybe just gossip to share with whoever would listen. "I'm working," Ellen said, but her legs were already shaking. The president pulled out a worn leather wallet and dropped 2 20s on the table, more than enough to cover 6 cups of coffee they hadn't even touched yet. His eyes never left Ellen's face. "When's your shift end?" 4 o'clock, Ellen heard herself say. "We'll be back at 4 o'clock. You're going to tell us everything. Every detail about your daughter, everything the cops ignored, everything you remember about the night she disappeared." Everything. Ellen felt something crack open inside her chest, some dam she'd been holding in place through sheer force of will for 21 days. Hope. Dangerous, painful hope that tasted like copper and salt. "Why would you help me?" she managed. "You don't even know us." The president's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. He glanced down at the bracelet on Ellen's wrist, then back up to her eyes, and something passed between them that needed no translation. "Because I know what it's like when everyone stops looking," he said. "And I know what it's like to wear something that belonged to someone you love and pretend it doesn't hurt every second it touches your skin." He stood up, the movement slow and deliberate, and his brothers rose with him like a single organism. They walked toward the door, boots heavy against the linoleum, and at the threshold the president stopped without turning around. 4 o'clock, Ellen. Don't make us come looking for you." Then they were gone, 6 motorcycles roaring back to life and disappearing down Route 9 in a thunder of exhaust and chrome. Ellen stood there with the coffee pot still in her hand, staring at the empty doorway, at the $40 on the table, at the truckers, who were suddenly very interested in their scrambled eggs again. Donna came rushing over from where she'd been hiding near the register, her face flushed with excitement and fear in equal measure. "Girl, what just happened? Are you okay? Should I call someone? Those bikers, they didn't threaten you or anything, did they?" But Ellen didn't answer. She was looking down at the bracelet on her wrist, at the tiny heart charm that caught the light and threw it back in fragments. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt something other than the crushing weight of helplessness that had been suffocating her since the morning she'd found Lily's bedroom empty and the window standing open like an accusation. The rest of Ellen's shift passed in a blur of motion with her memory. She poured coffee, took orders, delivered plates, refilled ketchup bottles, wiped down tables. Her body performed the familiar dance while her mind spun through the same questions on endless repeat. Who were those men? How did they know about the bracelets? Why did they care about a missing girl from a nothing town they'd probably just been passing through? By 3:30, she'd changed out of her uniform in the tiny bathroom that reeked of bleach and old cigarettes. By 3:45, she was sitting in her Honda Civic in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide if waiting was brave or stupid. The bikers said 4 o'clock, but what if they didn't come back? What if this was some cruel joke, or worse? What if they came back and made everything worse somehow? At precisely 4 o'clock, Ellen heard them before she saw them. The rumble started as a feeling in her chest, then became sound, then became 6 motorcycles pulling into Betty's parking lot in the same perfect formation they'd used that morning. The president dismounted, first pulling off his sunglasses, and his eyes found Ellen's Civic immediately, like he'd known exactly where she'd be waiting. He walked over and tapped on her window with one scarred knuckle. Ellen rolled it down her mouth, dry as the desert around them. "Follow us," he said. "There's a place about 10 miles up the road. Quiet, private. We can talk there." "I can't just leave my car here," Ellen protested, but it sounded weak even to her own ears. "Then drive it. We'll lead the way." Ellen climbed out of the Civic, her purse clutched against her chest like armor. The other bikers had gathered in a loose semicircle, and up close she could see them more clearly. 4 men, not 6. The president, the silver-haired man from the booth, a younger guy with a scar across his jaw who looked like he spent his free time breaking things, and a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses that seemed completely out of place on someone wearing a leather vest covered in patches. The president gestured to each of them in turn. "Hawk," he said, pointing to the silver-haired man. "My VP. Been riding together 30 years, Cross indicating the man with glasses. If it's got a screen or a circuit board, he can make it talk." Reaper, the younger one with the scar, who nodded once but didn't smile. Preacher and Ellen hadn't noticed the 4th man standing slightly apart from the others, older than the rest, with gentle eyes that seemed wrong for someone in a motorcycle club. "And I'm Granite," the president said. "Jack Morrison, if you need a government name. But everyone calls me Granite." Ellen nodded, not trusting her voice. She got into her Civic and started the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The motorcycles roared to life around her, 3 pulling ahead and 3 falling behind. And suddenly Ellen was part of a convoy heading deeper into the desert on a road she'd driven 1,000 times, but which now felt completely unfamiliar. 10 miles up Route 9, Granite's brake light flashed, and he turned onto a dirt road Ellen had passed countless times without really seeing. It led to an old rest stop that had been abandoned for years. Picnic tables rotting under rusted pavilions, graffiti covering bathroom walls, weeds pushing through cracks in the concrete, like the desert was slowly reclaiming what humans had briefly borrowed. The bikers parked their motorcycles in a semicircle. Ellen pulled in behind them and killed the engine, then sat for a long moment trying to remember how to make her legs work. Granite approached her door and opened it, extending his hand to help her out. His palm was rough and calloused and warm. "Come on," he said, his voice gentler than she'd expected. "Let's sit." They gathered around one of the less destroyed picnic tables, Ellen on one side and the 4 bikers on the other. Up close, she could see details the diner had hidden. Hawk had a wedding ring tan line, but no ring. Cross's fingers were stained with what looked like ink or grease. Reaper's knuckles were freshly scabbed over like he'd been in a fight recently. Preacher carried himself with the kind of stillness that suggested medical training or military background, maybe both. Granite folded his hands on the table and leaned forward slightly. His gray eyes locked on Ellen's face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but somehow couldn't. "Start from the beginning," he said. "The night she disappeared. Tell us everything." Ellen took a breath that felt like it might be her last one before drowning. The story came out in fragments at first, then in a flood, words she'd told the police and her neighbors, and anyone who would listen, but which no one had really heard. October 15th, a Tuesday. Lily came home from cheerleading practice around 6:30. They'd stopped at the grocery store on the way back, Ellen explained, and that's when it happened. A man approached Lily in the parking lot while Ellen was loading bags into the trunk. Dark hair, expensive suit, smile that probably worked on teenage girls who didn't know any better. He'd given Lily a business card, said she had the look for modeling, said he could make her some real money. Lily had laughed it off at the time. Ellen continued, her voice steady, but her hands twisting the bracelet around and around her wrist. She'd shown Ellen the card when they got home, made a joke about it, probably being a scam. Ellen had agreed, told her to throw it away, and Lily had nodded, and they'd moved on to making dinner. "Spaghetti," Ellen said, and her voice finally cracked. Her favorite since she was little. We sat at the kitchen table and she told me about her day, about the biology test she'd aced, about her plans for college. UC Davis, she wanted to study veterinary medicine. She was excited, happy. There was nothing wrong. Ellen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara she'd forgotten she was wearing. She went to bed around 10. Ellen continued. Kissed me goodnight. Said she loved me. I heard music from her room for maybe an hour. Then it got quiet. I thought she was asleep. I went to bed myself around 11. The next morning, Ellen woke up at 6:15 like always. She'd gone to Lily's room to wake her for school. The door was unlocked. The bed was empty, sheets tangled, like Lily had slept there, but left sometime during the night. The window was open, screen removed carefully, and placed inside the room rather than torn or broken. Ellen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Everything was there. Her phone on the nightstand still plugged into the charger. Her backpack by the door, homework finished and ready for school. Her shoes lined up on the floor. Her jacket on the hook. She was wearing pajamas and that bracelet. That's all. Nothing else. Granite's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Ellen forced herself to continue. I called the police at 7:30. Sheriff Brennan came himself, which I thought meant they were taking it seriously. He walked through the house, looked at Lily's room, asked me questions. But the questions were all wrong. What kind of questions? Hawk asked, his voice measured and calm. Whether Lily was troubled. Whether she had problems at school. Whether she'd ever talked about running away. Whether there was a boyfriend. Whether she did drugs. Ellen's hands clenched into fists on the table. I told him no, 1,000 times no. Lily was happy. She had plans. She had friends. She had a future. But he didn't believe me. Cross leaned forward slightly, his glasses catching the late afternoon light. Did they find any evidence? Fingerprints? Footprints? Anything? Ellen knotted her throat tight. There was a boot print on the windowsill. Muddy, size 11 or 12, way too big for Lily. I showed it to Sheriff Brennan. He looked at it, took a photo, said he'd look into it. Then he said it was probably from me from gardening. But I wear a size 7. That print was from a man's boot. And what did he say to that? Granite asked, his voice very quiet. That he'd look into it. That most runaways come back in 48 hours. That I should try not to worry. Ellen's laugh was bitter and broken. Try not to worry. My daughter disappeared from her bedroom in the middle of the night, and he told me not to worry. The bikers exchanged glances that Ellen couldn't quite read. Reaper's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Cross had pulled out a small notebook and was writing something down. Preacher sat very still with his hands folded. His expression suggesting he was doing calculations Ellen couldn't follow. What happened next? Hawk prompted gently. I called everyone I knew. Lily's friends, their parents, teachers, the school counselor. No one had seen her. No one knew anything. I printed missing person posters, hundreds of them, and put them up all over town. Most of them got torn down within a week. Ellen pulled out her phone with trembling hands and showed them the lock screen Lily's school photo from last year. 17 years old with blonde hair and freckles and green eyes that looked like they could see right through you. Smiling like the world was good and would stay that way forever. I hired a private investigator with money. I didn't have, Ellen said. He found nothing. I called the police every day for 2 weeks. Sheriff Brennan stopped returning my calls after the first week. Everyone stopped talking about it after the second week. By the third week, it was like Lily had never existed. But you knew, Granite said, and it wasn't a question. Ellen met his eyes and nodded. Mothers always know. Lily didn't run away. Someone took her. And Sheriff Brennan didn't look hard enough because he'd already decided she was just another troubled kid who left on her own. Granite sat back slowly, his expression unreadable. He glanced at Hawk, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Then he looked back at Ellen. That business card the man gave Lily. Do you still have it? Ellen's eyes widened. Yes. I found it in her desk drawer when I was looking for clues. The police looked at it, said it was probably nothing, just some photographer. But I kept it. We need to see that card, Cross said, his voice sharp with focus. Right now, Ellen stood up so fast she nearly knocked over the bench. It's at my house. I can take you there. 20 minutes later, they were parked outside Ellen's small house on the edge of Ridgemont, a modest place with peeling paint and a sagging fence, but flowers blooming in the garden despite everything. Ellen unlocked the front door with hands that wouldn't stay steady, and the 4 bikers followed her inside, their presence somehow making the living room feel even smaller than it was. Photos covered the walls, most of them featuring Lily at various ages. Smiling toddler with missing teeth. Awkward middle schooler in braces. Confident teenager in her cheerleading uniform. each picture a moment frozen in time back when the future still looked like something worth anticipating. Ellen led them upstairs to Lily's room. She'd left it exactly as she'd found it, that terrible morning, sheets still tangled, window still open even though the desert nights were cold now. The room smelled faintly of the vanilla perfume Lily liked, and Ellen had to close her eyes for a moment against the wave of grief that threatened to pull her under. She went to the desk and opened the top drawer, rummaging through papers and pens and old homework assignments until her fingers found the rectangular piece of cardstock. She pulled it out and held it up to the light. Prestige Talent Agency, the card declared in gold lettering. Derek Vaughn, Senior Scout. A phone number, an email address, an Instagram handle. Everything looked legitimate, professional, the kind of thing that might actually convince a 17-year-old girl she'd been discovered. Granite took the card, carefully holding it by the edges, like it might be evidence, which Ellen supposed it was. He studied it for a long moment, then took out his phone and photographed both sides before passing it to Cross. Cross examined it with the kind of focus Ellen associated with scientists or surgeons, turning it over in his hands, holding it at different angles. Finally, he pulled out his own phone and started typing with his thumbs, his face growing increasingly pale as he read whatever was appearing on his screen. Boss Cross said quietly, "I've seen this card before." The room went very still. Granite turned to look at his brother. "When?" Cross's voice came out rough and strained. "My niece had one. 2020, week before she disappeared. We never found her." Ellen felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Hawk moved quickly to steady her, guiding her to sit on Lily's bed before her legs gave out completely. "How many?" Ellen whispered. "How many girls?" Cross was still typing on his phone, his face now completely drained of color. "I'm seeing references to this agency in missing person reports from 3 different states. At least a dozen cases, maybe more. All teenage girls. All disappeared after contact with someone claiming to be a talent scout." Reaper spoke for the first time since entering the house, his voice low and dangerous. "This is a hunting operation. They're not random abductions. They're targeting specific girls and using this fake agency as the lure." Ellen couldn't breathe. The room spun around her, Lily's posters on the walls blurring into shapes without meaning. She'd known something was wrong, had screamed it at anyone who would listen, but having it confirmed like this was somehow worse than the uncertainty had been. Granite moved to sit on the bed beside Ellen, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the solid warmth of him, the kind of presence that suggested nothing could move him unless he chose to be moved. "Ellen," he said, and his voice carried a weight that made her look up despite the tears streaming down her face. "Your daughter didn't run away. Someone took her. Someone who's done this before and will do it again unless we stop them." "We," Ellen repeated. "Why we? Why do you care?" Granite was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on glass. Finally, he reached into his vest and pulled out something small enough to fit in his palm. A camera, old and worn, the kind that used actual film instead of digital storage. "My daughter's name was Sarah," Granite said, and his voice had gone flat and distant. "She was 15. Wanted to be a photographer. Loved birds and sunsets and her mother's cooking. 21 years ago, she went to the mall with friends and never came home." Ellen's breath caught. "We looked for her for 2 years. Police gave up after 6 months, said she was probably a runaway, told us to accept that kids sometimes just leave. But we kept looking, me and my wife Susan and anyone who would help. We put up posters. We called hospitals. We drove to every city within 500 miles. Nothing." Granite's hands tightened around the camera. "Found her in 2006. Shallow grave outside Phoenix. Autopsy showed she'd been held captive for almost 2 years. Malnourished. Signs of long-term abuse. Cause of death was overdose, probably forced. The investigation went nowhere. 3 arrests, all low-level nobodies. The people running the operation disappeared." Ellen reached out without thinking and put her hand over Granite's over the camera he was clutching like a lifeline. He didn't pull away. "Susan couldn't handle the grief," Granite continued. "Turned to alcohol. We divorced in 2009. She died in 2013, liver failure. I joined Iron Crossing full-time, became Granite instead of Jack Morrison. Spent 20 years trying to bury the pain under asphalt and engine noise." He finally looked at Ellen, and she saw something in his eyes, that she recognized because she'd seen it in her own mirror every morning for 3 weeks. When I saw that bracelet this morning, he said, I knew what it meant. I've worn Sarah's camera every day for 21 years because it's the only part of her I have left. You wear that bracelet because Lily is still out there and you need to feel connected to her. And I recognize that kind of hope because I remember what it felt like before mine died. Ellen's vision blurred with tears she couldn't wipe away fast enough. I couldn't save Sarah, Granite said, and his voice finally cracked around the edges. But maybe I can save Lily. Maybe we can save Lily. That's why we care. That's why we're going to help you. Ellen broke, then really broke, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Granite didn't try to comfort her with empty words or awkward pats. He just sat there solid and unmovable while she cried out 3 weeks of accumulated terror and helplessness into her hands. When she finally had enough breath back to speak, Ellen looked up at the 4 bikers crowded into her daughter's small bedroom and asked the only question that mattered. What do we do now? Cross was already on his phone typing rapidly. I'm running the number from the business card through some databases I probably shouldn't have access to. Give me 10 minutes? Hawk was examining Lily's room with the careful attention of someone trained to see details others missed. The window, the screen was removed from inside carefully. That's not consistent with someone climbing out. That's consistent with someone climbing in who didn't want to damage evidence of entry. Preacher had picked up a stuffed bear from Lily's pillow and was studying it with surprising gentleness. She still kept childhood things close. That suggests someone who valued security and comfort, not the profile of a runaway. Reaper stood by the window looking out at the street below. Boot print you mentioned. Sheriff photographed it but didn't preserve it. Convenient, almost like he wanted the evidence to disappear. Ellen felt something cold slide down her spine. What are you saying? I'm saying, Reaper continued without turning around, that if this is an organized operation targeting girls across multiple states, they've probably got protection somewhere. Cops who look the other way, officials who bury cases, money changing hands to keep things quiet. Cross looked up from his phone, suddenly his face pale. Boss? The number from the card, last pinged off a cell tower 3 towns over. Place called Ashford. Industrial area mostly abandoned, but satellite imaging shows recent activity at one of the warehouse complexes. Granite stood up all business now. How recent? Within the last 48 hours. Heat signatures suggest occupied buildings. Security cameras recently installed. This isn't random squatters. This is active operation. Ellen stood up too, her fear transforming into something harder and sharper. Then that's where she is. That's where Lily is. Maybe Hawk cautioned. We don't know for sure. Could be a dead end. Or it could be exactly what we're looking for, Granite said. Either way, we're checking it out. He turned to Ellen, his expression serious. This is where it gets complicated. We can't just storm in there without knowing what we're dealing with. We need reconnaissance first. Intelligence. A plan. How long? Ellen asked, her voice tight. A day, maybe 2. We move too fast without proper intel. We tip them off, and they move the girls somewhere we'll never find them. Ellen's hands clenched into fists. 2 more days. Lily's been gone 3 weeks, and you want me to wait 2 more days. I want Lily to survive what comes next, Granite said bluntly. And that means doing this right instead of fast. Ellen wanted to argue, wanted to scream that every hour mattered, that her daughter was out there suffering while they talked about plans and reconnaissance. But looking at Granite's face at the same pain she carried, reflected back at her through different eyes, she understood that he knew exactly what he was asking her to endure. Okay, Ellen whispered. 2 days, but I'm coming with you when you go. No, Granite said immediately. Yes, Ellen countered. She's my daughter. I'm not sitting at home while you risk your lives for her. The bikers exchanged glances. Hawk cleared his throat. Ma'am, with respect, this could get dangerous. We're trained for this kind of situation. You're not. I don't care, Ellen said, and her voice came out stronger than she'd felt in weeks. I've spent 3 weeks being helpless, while everyone told me to wait, to trust the system, to believe my daughter would come home on her own. I'm done waiting. I'm done trusting people who don't believe me. If you're going after Lily, I'm going with you. Granite studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but you follow orders. You do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. No heroics, No running ahead. You stay behind us and you stay safe. Understood. Understood. Ellen agreed even though she was already planning to do whatever it took to reach her daughter regardless of anyone's orders. Cross interrupted his phone pressed to his ear. Boss got confirmation from the Reno chapter. They've heard of Prestige Talent Agency. It's a front operation. No actual modeling work, no legitimate business address. They've linked it to at least 8 missing girls in Nevada alone over the past 3 years. Granite's jaw tightened. Anyone have a name besides Derek Vaughn? Cross shook his head. Vaughn's the scout, the visible face. But someone higher up is running the operation. Money trail goes through shell companies' offshore accounts. Professional level stuff. Then we start with Vaughn, Reaper said. Find him, make him talk, follow the chain up. Granite turned to Ellen. Do you have Lily's phone records? Credit card statements. Anything that shows where she went in the weeks before she disappeared? Ellen nodded quickly. I kept everything the police looked at. I have copies of all of it. I'll get it. She hurried downstairs to the small office nook where she'd been obsessively organizing evidence for 3 weeks. Binders full of documents highlighted and annotated every piece of paper she could think of that might possibly help find Lily. She grabbed the whole stack and carried it back upstairs to where the bikers were waiting. Cross took the binders and started flipping through them with practiced efficiency. Hawk looked over his shoulder, both of them, scanning pages faster than Ellen would have thought possible. Here, Cross said, suddenly pointing to a phone bill. This number called Lily 4 times in the 2 weeks before she disappeared. Short calls under 2 minutes each, except the last one, which was about 2 minutes. Ellen leaned over to look. The police said those were probably spam calls. Cross snorted. These aren't spam patterns, these are grooming calls. First contact is brief establishing initial connection. Second and third calls, slightly longer building rapport. Fourth call is the longest, because that's when he makes the pitch, probably suggests a meeting. Can you trace the number? Granite asked. Already running it, Cross said, his fingers flying across his phone screen. It's a burner, no surprise there, but I can track where it pinged off towers and build a pattern. He went quiet for a moment, frowning at his screen. Then his expression changed to something darker. Boss, this is interesting. The phone that called Lily also shows up in case files from 4 other missing girls. Same MO, same timing pattern, same everything. So Vaughn uses the same burner for multiple targets, Hawk mused. Sloppy or arrogant. Or both, Reaper added. Cross looked up suddenly, his face pale. Boss, I've got something else. The number pinged off a tower in Ridgemont 2 days ago. Vaughn's still in the area. The room went electric. Granite straightened up, his voice taking on an edge of command that suggested years of leading men into situations where commands meant the difference between living and dying. Cross, I need an address. Anything that connects to that phone in the last 48 hours. On it, Cross said, already typing. Hawk, Granite continued. Call the Phoenix chapter. See if they have any intel on this Vaughn character or the Prestige operation. Reaper, check if we have any friendly contacts in local law enforcement. Someone who might actually care about missing teenage girls. Preacher, you're with me. We need to start mapping out the Ashford location entry points, security patterns, everything. The bikers scattered to their assigned tasks with the kind of synchronization that came from years of working together. Ellen stood in the middle of Lily's room, feeling simultaneously more hopeful and more terrified than she had in 3 weeks. Granite turned back to her, his voice gentler now. Ellen, I need you to stay by your phone. If we find anything, if we need anything from you, I'm going to call. But you need to try to go about your normal routine as much as possible. If someone's watching you, we don't want them to know we're involved yet. Ellen nodded, not trusting her voice. One more thing, Granite said. Sheriff Brennan, you said he came to your house personally when Lily disappeared. Yes, Ellen confirmed. He seemed concerned at the time. He's called me a few times since then to check in, ask if I've heard anything. Granite exchanged a look with Hawk that Ellen couldn't quite interpret. When did he last call? 3 days ago, Ellen said. Why? Just tracking timelines, Granite said, but Ellen could tell he wasn't being entirely truthful. What did he ask you about? Whether Lily had contacted me. Whether I'd hired anyone to help look for her. Where I'd been putting up missing person posters? Ellen paused, remembering. It seemed nice at the time, like he cared. But now that you mention it, the questions were more about what I was doing than about finding Lily. Hawk's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Granite's expression remained carefully neutral. If Sheriff Brennan calls again, be polite, but vague. Don't mention us. Don't mention anything you have learned today. Just tell him you're still waiting and hoping. You think he's involved? Ellen said, and it wasn't really a question. I think we don't know who to trust yet, Granite replied. And until we do, we trust no one except the people in this room. Cross looked up from his phone, excitement and grim satisfaction mixing on his face. Boss got an address. Motel on the edge of town, Desert Star Inn. Security footage shows a man matching Vaughn's description checking into room 237 3 days ago. He's been going in and out on a regular schedule. Granite smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then I think it's time Mr. Vaughn and I had a conversation. Hawk Reaper, you're with me. Cross, you stay here with Ellen. Keep tracking that phone and see what else you can dig up digitally. Preacher, I want you mapping out Ashford, every entry point and weak spot you can find. When are you going? Ellen asked. Tonight, Granite said. Can't risk him moving locations before we can talk to him. He headed for the door, then paused and looked back at Ellen one more time. We're going to find your daughter. I don't make promises I can't keep, so I'm not promising she'll be okay when we find her. But I promise we won't stop looking until we know what happened to her. That's the best I can offer. It's more than anyone else has offered, Ellen said quietly. Thank you. Granite nodded once, then disappeared down the stairs with Hawk and Reaper behind him. Cross settled into Lily's desk chair with his laptop fingers already flying across the keyboard. Preacher gave Ellen a gentle nod and headed out, leaving her alone with Cross and the crushing weight of hope that felt more dangerous than despair ever had. Ellen sat on Lily's bed and pulled out her phone. The lock screen still showed that school photo, Lily smiling like the world was good. Ellen touched the screen, tracing her daughter's face with one finger, and whispered a prayer she didn't know if anyone was listening to. Hold on, baby. Just hold on a little longer. I'm coming. We're all coming. Outside, 3 motorcycles roared to life and disappeared into the gathering darkness. Cross typed steadily at the desk, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. And Ellen sat in her daughter's room, surrounded by photos and stuffed animals, and all the debris of a life interrupted, wearing a silver bracelet that matched one somewhere out there in the dark, hoping against hope that 21 days of hell was about to end. The Desert Star Inn squatted on the eastern edge of Ridgemont like a monument to optimism that had died decades ago. Neon sign missing half its letters, parking lot, more pothole than pavement, rooms that rented by the hour and didn't ask questions. Granite pulled his motorcycle into the shadows behind a dumpster, Hawk and Reaper flanking him on either side. Room 237 faced the parking lot, curtains drawn, but light visible through the cracks. A white sedan sat parked directly in front, Nevada plates that Cross had already confirmed were registered to a shell company tied to prestige talent. Granite killed his engine and dismounted his boots, silent on the cracked asphalt. How do you want to play this? Hawk asked quietly. Granite studied the room for a long moment, calculating angles and options. Front door is too obvious. He'll run or fight either way. We lose time and make noise. Reaper, you cover the back window in case he rabbits. Hawk, you're with me. We knock polite like, see if Mr. Vaughn wants to have a friendly conversation. And if he doesn't want to be friendly, Reaper asked with a grim smile. Then we get unfriendly, Granite said. They moved into position, 3 shadows crossing the parking lot without sound. Reaper disappeared around the side of the building toward the back window. Granite and Hawk approached the door, flanking it on either side. Granite raised his fist and knocked 3 times, firm, but not aggressive. Housekeeping, he called in a voice that didn't sound like his own. Movement inside, footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, security chains still attached, and a man's face appeared in the gap. Dark hair going gray at the temples, expensive cologne, warring with the motel's mildew smell, eyes that went from annoyed to alarmed in the space between one heartbeat and the next. We're not interested, Derek Vaughn said, already trying to close the door. Granite's boot hit the door before it could shut, the security chains snapping with a sound like a gunshot. Vaughn stumbled backward as Granite and Hawk pushed inside, and suddenly the small motel room felt very crowded. Vaughn recovered quickly, his hand going for something in his jacket, but Reaper appeared from the bathroom where he'd come through the window, and the expression on his face made Vaughn's hand freeze halfway to whatever weapon he'd been reaching for. Sit down, Granite said quietly, and it wasn't a request. Vaughn sat on the edge of the bed, hands visible, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. His eyes darted from Granite to Hawk to Reaper and back again, probably trying to figure out if they were cops or something worse. I don't know who you are, Vaughn started, but this is breaking and entering an assault, and Lily Wilder Granite interrupted. 17 years old, blonde hair, green eyes, disappeared from her bedroom 3 weeks ago. You gave her your business card 2 weeks before that. Vaughn's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Reaper moved faster than someone his size should be able to move, grabbing Vaughn's right hand and bending the pinky finger back until something popped. Vaughn screamed. Wrong answer, Reaper said conversationally. Let's try again. Lily Wilder. Vaughn was breathing hard through his nose, cradling his broken finger, sweat breaking out across his forehead. I want a lawyer. I have rights. You have the right to answer questions before we break something more important than a finger, Hawk said pleasantly. Now Lily Wilder. Vaughn looked from face to face and apparently decided that lawyers weren't going to help him in this particular situation. I don't hurt them, he said quickly. I just recruit them. I just make the initial contact. What happens after that, I don't know. But you know where they go, Granite said. Vaughn hesitated. Reaper grabbed his left hand. The scream came faster this time. Ashford Vaughn gasped out. Building C at the old industrial complex. They keep them there for processing before shipping them out. Processing, Hawk repeated flatly. Like their packages. Vaughn wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. How many girls are there right now? Granite asked. I don't know exactly. Maybe 15, 20. They move them in and out depending on orders. Orders from who? Granite continued. Vaughn shook his head violently. I can't tell you that. They'll kill me. And you think we won't? Reaper asked, and something in his voice suggested he wasn't bluffing. Vaughn looked up at Granite, saw something in those gray eyes that made him start talking fast. Sheriff Brennan, Marcus Brennan. He runs the whole operation. Has for years. Uses his position to cover things up, makes investigations go away, keeps everyone looking in the wrong direction. The room went very quiet. Granite's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him like a storm gathering force before it broke. Marcus Brennan Granite repeated. Sheriff of Ridgemont. Vaughn nodded frantically. He started it 12 years ago after he retired from the FBI. Had connections, knew how to move money, knew how the system worked. He recruited me 5 years ago when I was working as an actual talent scout, and things weren't going well financially. What's your cut? Hawk asked. $5,000 per successful placement. More if they're premium. Premium, Granite said, and his voice had gone very quiet and very dangerous. Younger, prettier, virgins. The buyers pay more for certain qualities. Reaper's fist connected with Vaughn's face before anyone could stop him. Blood sprayed from Vaughn's nose and he toppled backward onto the bed moaning. Granite put a hand on Reaper's chest, holding him back from continuing the beating. We need him conscious, Granite said, then looked down at Vaughn. How many over the years? Total. Best guess. Vaughn spat blood onto the stained carpet. I don't know. I only recruited about 30 myself, but there were others before me. The operation's been running since 2013. Do the math. 40 girls at minimum, Hawk said. Maybe 50 or 60. Probably more, Vaughn said miserably. Brennan's careful, but he's not small time. And Lily Wilder Granite asked, where is she specifically? Still at Ashford as far as I know. They were supposed to move her and a batch of others tomorrow night. Private plane to Bangkok. Already paid for by the buyer. Tomorrow night, Granite repeated. That's less than 24 hours. Vaughn nodded, blood still dripping from his nose. You're going to call? Brennan Granite said. Tell him everything's on schedule. Tell him you've got someone snooping around that you need help with. Tell him you're at the motel and you need backup to dispose of a body. Whose body? Vaughn asked. Mine, Granite said. Vaughn's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, blood still dripping from his broken nose, onto the motel bedspread. Granite stood over him with the kind of stillness that suggested violence held in check by pure will, while Hawk positioned himself by the window, watching the parking lot for any sign of movement. Reaper had disappeared into the bathroom, running water to wash Vaughn's blood off his knuckles. Put it on speaker, Granite instructed, his voice flat. Vaughn's thumb hovered over the screen for a moment too long. Granite's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, not hard, but with enough pressure to make his intentions clear. You call him. You say exactly what I told you. You try to warn him, and I'll let Reaper finish what he started. Are we clear? We're clear, Vaughn whispered. The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered, gravelly and tired, like someone woken from sleep or interrupted from something more important. This better be good, Derek. Sheriff, we have a problem. Vaughn's voice cracked on the last word, and he swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. Someone broke into my room. Big guy biker type. Says he knows you. Says his name is Granite. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Granite wondered if the connection had dropped. Then the voice came back different, now sharper and more focused. Granite. Jack Morrison. You know him? Vaughn asked, genuine surprise breaking through his fear. Where are you right now? The sheriff asked, ignoring the question. Desert Star Inn, room 237. He's here with 2 others. They know about Ashford. They know about the operation. Another pause. This one waited with calculation. Is he listening right now? Granite leaned close to the phone, his voice carrying the kind of cold certainty that came from years of knowing when to be patient and when to strike. Hello, Kyle. The name landed like a thrown knife. Vaughn's eyes went wide, looking between Granite and the phone with dawning understanding that this was more than just a sheriff and a biker having a territorial dispute. Jack Morrison, the voice on the phone said, and something in it shifted from professional concern to something more personal and infinitely more dangerous. Been a long time. Not long enough, Granite replied. We need to talk, man to man, about old times, about Sarah, about what you've been doing in this town for the past 12 years. I don't know what your boy Derek has been telling you, Brennan said carefully, but trafficking accusations are serious business. You should be talking to the FBI, not breaking into motel rooms and assaulting citizens. I did talk to the FBI, Granite said. 21 years ago, they arrested 3 nobody dealers and let the real operation keep running. Funny how that works. Hawk caught Granite's eye and tapped his watch, a silent reminder that they were burning time. Granite nodded acknowledgement. Here's what's going to happen, Kyle. You're going to meet me. Alone. We're going to have a conversation about Lily Wilder and 17 other girls currently being held at an industrial complex you happen to own through a shell company. And then you're going to decide whether you want to end this, quietly or loudly. And if I don't want to meet, Brennan asked, then tomorrow morning the FBI gets everything we've collected. Photos, financial records, testimony from Derek here, who's being very cooperative now that Reaper broke 2 of his fingers. Your operation ends either way. But if you meet me, maybe we can work something out that doesn't involve you dying in prison. The silence stretched longer this time. Granite could almost hear the calculations happening on the other end, the weighing of options and consequences. Where and when, Brennan finally asked. Your choice, Granite said, but make it soon. We both know those girls don't have much time left. There's an old grain elevator on Route 47 about 15 miles south of town. Abandoned for years. Meet me there in 1 hour. Come alone. I'll be there. Granite confirmed. And Kyle, if I see any deputies or backup or even a civilian who looks suspicious, Derek here becomes the star witness in a federal case and you lose any chance of controlling how this plays out. Understood, Brennan said and disconnected. Granite straightened up, his expression unreadable. Hawk moved away from the window, concern written across his weathered face. Boss, this is a trap. He's not going to come alone, and he's not going to negotiate. I know, Granite said quietly. Then why are we doing this? Reaper asked from the bathroom doorway, drying his hands on a towel that had probably never been white. Because I need to hear him say it. I need to know if Kyle Brennan is who I think he is, or if there's something I'm missing. He's a trafficker who's been selling children for over a decade, Hawk said flatly. What else do you need to know? Granite pulled out his phone and started texting rapidly. I need to know if the man who saved my life in Vietnam is completely gone, or if there's anything left in there worth saving. He's not worth saving, Reaper said, and you know it. Granite looked up from his phone, his gray eyes hard as the name he'd taken. Maybe not, but I owe him the chance to prove it one way or the other. He turned to Vaughn, who had been watching this exchange with the expression of someone realizing he'd stumbled into something much more complicated than a simple trafficking bust. You're going to stay here with Cross, Granite told him. He's on his way now. You're going to tell him everything you know about the Ashford facility. Guard rotations, security systems, floor plans where the girls are kept, everything. If you leave anything out or lie about anything, Cross will know, and Reaper will come back to finish our earlier conversation. Clear, Crystal Vaughn said miserably. Good. Granite pocketed his phone and headed for the door. Hawk Reaper, let's move. We've got 45 minutes to set up before Kyle arrives. They left Vaughn handcuffed to the bathroom pipe with a towel pressed to his still bleeding nose, the motel room door locked from the outside. 3 motorcycles fired up in the darkness and disappeared down Route 47, heading south, leaving behind only the smell of exhaust and the fading rumble of engines. The grain elevator rose against the night sky like a concrete tombstone, 60 feet of industrial decay, surrounded by fields that hadn't seen crops in 20 years. Granite parked his bike behind what remained of an equipment shed and walked the perimeter, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, his mind cataloging exits and angles and places where a man could hide with a rifle. Hawk appeared from the western approach, moving silent despite his size. Nothing on that side. Ground soft enough, I'd hear anyone moving through it. Reaper came from the east, found tire tracks about 100 yards out. Recent probably from today. Someone's been here scouting, so he's taking this seriously, Granite said. Good. That means he's worried. That means he's planning to kill you, Hawk corrected. Granite pulled the .45 from his shoulder holster and checked the magazine, then chambered around and safetied it before holstering again. Then he better be a better shot than he was in 72. What's the play here, Boss Reaper asked. We can't let you walk in there alone. You're not, Granite said. You're going to be in position with clear sight lines. Hawk takes the north approach. Reaper takes south. Anything moves that isn't me or Kyle, you put it down. But you don't shoot Kyle unless he shoots first. I need to talk to him. And if talking doesn't work, Hawk asked. Then we do this the hard way, Granite replied. They spread out into the darkness, 2 shadows melting into positions that provided overlapping fields of fire on the open ground in front of the grain elevator. Granite walked to the center of the clearing and stood there, hands loose at his sides, waiting. 20 minutes past the appointed hour, headlights appeared on Route 47. A single vehicle driving slowly, a sheriff's department SUV with no emergency lights. It pulled to a stop 30 yards from where Granite stood, engine idling for a long moment before shutting off. The driver's door opened, and a man climbed out, silhouetted against the distant glow of Ridgemont's lights. Sheriff Marcus Brennan was 58 years old and looked like he'd spent every one of those years preparing for violence that might or might not come. 6 feet tall, 200 pounds of muscle going soft around the middle, gray hair cut military short, and eyes that had seen things most people spent their whole lives successfully avoiding. He wore his uniform without the hat, and his hand rested on his service weapon without quite drawing it. Jack Morrison Brennan said, his voice carrying across the open ground. You always did have a gift for making things complicated. Granite didn't move, didn't respond, just watched as Brennan walked closer with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield. You look old, Brennan continued. We both do, I suppose. Time's a bastard that way. You look like a man who's been sleeping well, Granite said. That's interesting, considering what you've been doing. Brennan stopped about 10 feet away, far enough that drawing and firing would be a choice rather than a reflex. What exactly do you think I've been doing, Jack? Don't call me that. Jack Morrison died the same day Sarah did. I'm Granite now. Brennan's expression softened slightly, something that might have been genuine regret crossing his weathered face. Sarah. God, I'm sorry about Sarah. That was a tragedy. But you can't blame me for that. Can I? Granite asked quietly. You were the FBI agent assigned to her case. You arrested 3 dealers and closed the investigation. But the operation kept running, didn't it? The people at the top walked away clean. And now I find out you've been running a trafficking network out of this town for 12 years. Brennan's hand tightened on his weapon but didn't draw it. You don't understand how the world works, Jack. Granite, whatever you're calling yourself these days, these operations are hydras. You cut off 1 head and 3 more grow back. The FBI can't stop them. The DEA can't stop them. They're too big, too connected, too profitable. So your solution was to join them, Granite said, and disgust dripped from every word. My solution was to survive, Brennan shot back. You know what the Bureau paid me after 15 years of service. You know what my pension was worth. I gave them everything, and they gave me barely enough to keep a roof over my head. Meanwhile, the people I was supposed to be stopping were getting rich. So you sold children, Granite said flatly. That's your justification. The system didn't pay you enough, so you started selling children. I provided a service that would exist with or without me, Brennan said, his voice hardening. The market doesn't care who fills it. If not me, someone else. At least I kept things relatively clean. No unnecessary violence. No killing unless absolutely required. The girls went to buyers who wanted them alive and functional. Granite felt something cold and murderous settle in his chest. You're trying to sell me on the idea that you're the good guy in this scenario. I'm telling you, I'm a pragmatist in a world that doesn't reward idealism, Brennan replied. You should understand that. You've been living outside the law for decades with that motorcycle club. Don't lecture me about morality. The Iron Crossing doesn't traffic human beings, Granite said, his voice going very quiet. We've broken laws when laws deserve breaking, but we have lines we don't cross. You crossed every line that matters. Brennan studied him for a long moment, then sighed. I didn't come here to debate philosophy with you, Jack. What do you want? Money? A cut? Your silence? Name your price. I want Lily Wilder and every other girl you're holding at Ashford released, Granite said. Tonight. And then you're going to turn yourself in to the FBI with a full confession. Brennan laughed a short, bitter sound. And if I don't, then my brothers raid Ashford, free the girls, and your operation ends in a way that makes you wish you'd taken my offer. You'd need proof for the FBI to act, Brennan pointed out, and I've been very careful about evidence. Granite pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up screen, glowing in the darkness. Derek Vaughn is currently giving a detailed confession to my tech guy. Every transaction, every girl, every buyer. He's also providing financial records that trace money directly to you. Shell companies aren't as anonymous as you think when someone knows where to look. Brennan's expression hardened. Derek's a dead man. Derek's in protective custody. Granite lied smoothly. You touch him and you confirm everything he's saying. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of trucks on the highway and the whisper of wind through dead grass. You know I can't let you walk away from this, Brennan finally said. I know you're going to try to stop me, Granite agreed. Question is whether you're going to do it the easy way or the hard way. Brennan's hand moved toward his holster. Granite's hand was already on his .45. The shot that rang out didn't come from either of them. Brennan staggered, a red flower blooming on his left shoulder, and spun toward the source of the gunfire. A second shot kicked up dirt at his feet. Granite dove to the side, came up with his weapon drawn, scanning for targets. Hawk's voice crackled through the small radio earpiece Granite wore. 2 shooters, North Ridge. They're not aiming at you, boss. They're shooting at Brennan. Brennan had dropped to one knee, his own weapon out, now firing towards the muzzle flashes on the ridge. More shots answered, and Granite realized with cold certainty that this wasn't a setup by Brennan. This was someone else's play entirely. Reaper's voice came through the radio, tense and focused. Boss, get to cover. We've got 4 more coming in from the south. They're dressed like deputies, but the gear is wrong. This is a hit squad. Granite lunged toward Brennan, grabbed his uninjured arm, and hauled him toward the minimal cover of an old concrete footer. Who are they? Granite demanded. Brennan was breathing hard, blood soaking through his uniform shirt. Buyers. Has to be. Someone found out about your investigation and decided to clean house before you could blow the operation. They're shooting at you, not me, Granite pointed out. Because I'm the liability. Brennan gasped. You're just a biker making noise. I'm the one who knows where all the bodies are buried. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions now. Hawk and Reaper were returning fire from their positions, the distinctive crack of rifle rounds, mixing with the heavier boom of pistol shots. Granite pulled Brennan fully behind the concrete footer and pressed his hand against the shoulder wound. How many people are in on this operation? Granite asked urgently. Too many, Brennan said through gritted teeth. Local deputies, state police, FBI contacts, buyers across 3 continents. You think taking me down ends this? It just cuts off one tentacle, the girls at Ashford, Granite said. Are they real? Or was that a lie to draw me out? They're real, Brennan confirmed. 18 of them currently. Shipment was supposed to go out tomorrow night on a private charter from an airstrip outside Ashford. If I don't check in by midnight, the operation scrubs and moves them somewhere you'll never find. What time is it now? Granite asked. Brennan checked his watch with his good hand. 11:15, you've got 45 minutes. Granite keyed his radio. Hawk, Reaper, we need to break contact and get to Ashford. Clock's running. Copy that, Hawk responded. But we've got at least 6 hostiles between us and the bikes. This is going to get messy. Then let's get messy, Granite said. He turned back to Brennan, whose face had gone pale from blood loss. Can you walk? If the alternative is dying here, I can run, Brennan said. Then move, stay low, and follow me. They broke cover in a crouching run, Granite laying down covering fire while Brennan stumbled along behind him. A bullet whined past Granite's ear close enough that he felt the displacement of air. Another kicked up dirt between his boots. He fired 3 shots toward the muzzle flash on the ridge, didn't wait to see if he hit anything, just kept moving. Hawk appeared from behind the equipment shed rifle to his shoulder, firing in controlled bursts that suggested years of practice. 2 of the shooters on the ridge went down or went to ground. Granite couldn't tell which and didn't care as long as they stopped shooting. Reaper materialized from the southern approach, his face set in the kind of expression that meant someone was about to have a very bad night. He grabbed Brennan's other arm, and between him and Granite, they half-carried the wounded sheriff toward where the motorcycles waited. Can he ride? Reaper asked. I'll ride, Brennan grunted. Just get me on a bike. They reached the motorcycles just as more gunfire erupted from the ridge. Glass shattered on Hawk's bike as a round took out his taillight. Granite's windshield spiderwebbed but held. Reaper's bike took a round through the gas tank, and fuel started leaking onto the dirt. Well, that's not good, Reaper observed with remarkable calm. Take mine, Brandon ordered, already swinging onto Hawk's bike. Hawk, you're with Brennan on his ride. I'll take yours. Move, move, move. 4 engines roared to life. They rocketed out of the clearing with bullets chasing them, the night air filled with the scream of engines being pushed past safe limits. Granite's speedometer hit 90 on a dirt road that hadn't been maintained since Reagan was president, the bike threatening to shake itself apart, but he held it steady through sheer force of will. His radio crackled. Boss, we've got company. Headlights behind us closing fast. Granite risked a glance in his mirror and saw 2 vehicles coming up, hard light, bars flashing but no sirens. The lead vehicle pulled alongside Reaper, and someone leaned out the passenger window with a shotgun. Reaper saw it coming and swerved left just as the shotgun boomed. Buckshot tore chunks out of the road surface where he'd been a heartbeat before. Reaper counter-swerved right the bike's engine, screaming as he accelerated past the vehicle, and then cut hard across its path. The driver had 2 choices, brake or crash. He chose braking, and the second vehicle ran into the back of the first with a crunch of metal and breaking glass. That bought them 30 seconds before the vehicles recovered and resumed pursuit. Granite pushed Hawk's bike harder, coaxing more speed out of an engine that was already giving everything it had. Route 47 came up fast, and he took the turn at an angle that left rubber on the pavement and nearly dumped the bike. But he held it through the apex and gunned it toward Ridgement. The vehicles followed, still closing. Granite could see the passenger in the lead truck reloading the shotgun, getting ready for another try. We need to split up. Hawk's voice came through the radio. Draw them in different directions. Negative, Granite replied. We all go to Ashford together or this doesn't work. Then we need to lose them before we get there, Hawk said. Can't roll up to a rescue operation with a hit squad on our tail. Working on it, Granite muttered. They hit the outskirts of Ridgement, doing 80 in a 45 zone, blowing through a red light at the main intersection, while a minivan slammed on its brakes and laid on the horn. The pursuing vehicles ran the same light, still coming, and now Granite could hear sirens in the distance. Real cops responding to reports of a high-speed chase, which was exactly what they didn't need. Boss, we've got about 2 minutes before this entire operation falls apart. Reaper said, his voice tight with tension. Granite made a decision. Hawk, take Brennan to the old church on 5th Street. Preacher's got a field hospital set up there. Get that shoulder looked at and get him stabilized. Reaper, you're with me. We're going to Ashford now. What about the tail? Hawk asked. I'll handle it, Granite said. Take the next right and get gone. Hawk peeled off at the intersection, Brennan holding on behind him with his good arm. The pursuing vehicles hesitated for a moment, trying to decide which target to follow, and in that moment of hesitation, Granite and Reaper opened up the throttles and disappeared into the industrial district on the eastern edge of town. The vehicles chose to follow them, which was what Granite had been counting on. He led them through a maze of narrow streets between warehouses and storage facilities, places he'd scouted years ago during other operations, places where the roads were barely wide enough for motorcycles, let alone trucks. The lead vehicle tried to follow anyway and clipped a dumpster, tearing off its passenger side mirror and putting a dent in the door. The second vehicle had more sense and fell back, but both of them kept coming with the kind of determination that suggested they'd been paid very well to make sure certain people didn't survive the night. Granite took a hard left into an alley that opened onto a loading dock. He jumped the bike up onto the dock, rode through the covered area where trucks would normally park for unloading, and dropped off the other side onto a parallel street. Reaper followed without hesitation, both bikes catching air and landing hard but keeping rubber on asphalt. The vehicles couldn't follow that route. By the time they'd found a way around Granite and Reaper had disappeared into the night, running dark without lights, navigating by memory and feel toward Ashford. They reached the outskirts of town and Granite finally allowed himself to ease back on the throttle, letting the engine cool down from the sustained abuse. Reaper pulled alongside, his face grim in the wash of moonlight. "That was too close," Reaper said. "It's about to get closer," Granite replied. "Call Cross. Get a status update on Ashford. I want to know exactly what we're riding into." Reaper pulled out his phone and dialed while they rode, putting it on speaker so Granite could hear. Cross's voice came through tinny but clear. "Boss, I've got good news and bad news. Good news is Vaughn sang like a canary. I've got complete floor plans of the Ashford facility guard, schedules, security systems, specs, everything. Bad news is the facility just went on high alert about 10 minutes ago. Every light is on, guards are mobilized, and they're moving vehicles around like they're preparing for either an assault or an evacuation." "Someone tipped them," Granite said. "Probably whoever sent the hit squad after Brennan." "There's more," Cross continued. "I've been monitoring police bands. Sheriff's Department just put out a bolo on you in the club. They're calling it attempted murder of a law enforcement officer." "Of course they are," Granite muttered. "Kyle's got deputies on his payroll who are trying to control the narrative." "What's the play?" Boss Reaper asked. "We stick to the mission," Granite said. "Those girls don't have until morning. If the facility is on alert, they're probably moving them right now. We get there, we get them out, everything else is secondary." "With what numbers?" Reaper pointed out. "It's just the two of us against how many guards?" Cross interrupted. "I've got something that might help. There's a local FBI agent I've been in contact with, SSA Jennifer Kwan. She worked with you on Sarah's case back in 2006. Remember her?" Granite's hands tightened on the handlebars. "I remember. Young agent, first year in the field. She tried hard on Sarah's case, even after everyone else had given up." "Well, she's not young anymore, and she's senior staff now," Cross said. "I sent her everything we've collected on Brennan's operation. She's mobilizing a tactical team, but they're at least 90 minutes out from Ashford." "We don't have 90 minutes, Granite said. "I know," Cross replied. "That's why she said, and I quote, 'Tell Granite to keep those girls alive until I get there, and I'll make sure the official report matches his story instead of Brennan's version.'" "She's giving us permission to go in," Reaper said, surprised. "She's giving us a rope that's either going to pull us out or hang us," Granite corrected. "But I'll take it. Cross, send me everything you have on Ashford. Guard positions, entry points, the works. We're going in now. Copy that." "Boss, sending now. And boss, there's one more thing." "What?" Granite asked. "Ellen's on her way to Ashford. She left her house about 20 minutes ago despite being told to stay put. I tried to stop her, but she wasn't answering her phone." Granite swore under his breath. "Of course she is, because nothing about tonight could be simple." He cut the connection and looked at Reaper. "You good for this?" "We're going into an unknown number of hostiles with no backup, and a mother who's about to walk into a firefight looking for her daughter." Reaper's scarred face split into a grin that had nothing to do with humor. "Brother, I was born good for this." They rode the last 10 miles to Ashford in silence, each man alone with his thoughts and the weight of what they were about to attempt. The facility appeared on the horizon like a fortress, 3 massive buildings surrounded by chain-link fence and harsh security lights that turned night into artificial day. Granite pulled the bike into cover behind an abandoned warehouse about a quarter-mile from the facility and killed the engine. Reaper stopped beside him, both men sitting in the darkness studying their target. Cross's intel came through on Granite's phone, detailed floor plans and guard positions updating in real time as Cross monitored security cameras remotely. 18 girls in the basement of Building C. Cross's text read, 6 guards, currently visible, probably more inside. Security system is armed, but I can create a 30-second loop when you're ready to move. Back entrance has a blind spot during guard rotation. You'll have 90 seconds. Granite texted back. How many vehicles? 4 panel vans in the loading area. Engines running. They're preparing to move the girls now. Then we're out of time, Granite said aloud. Reaper, we go in fast and hard. Priority 1 is securing the girls. Everything else is secondary. What about the guards? Reaper asked. Non-lethal if possible, Granite said. But if they threaten the girls or us, no mercy. Understood. They moved toward the facility on foot, leaving the motorcycles hidden in case they needed a fast exit. Granite's phone buzzed with another text from Cross. Boss, I'm tracking Ellen's car. She's 2 minutes out from your position. She's going to drive straight to the front gate. Granite swore again, more creatively this time. Can you stop her? Already tried. She's not answering her phone and her car doesn't have remote disable. Granite made a decision he knew he was going to regret. Then we use her as a distraction. When she hits the front gate, every guard is going to focus there. That's when we go in the back. Boss, that's putting her directly in danger, Reaper said. She put herself in danger the moment she got in her car, Granite replied. Now we make her choice mean something. They reached the fence line and Granite pulled out the bolt cutters Cross had insisted they carry. The fence was newer than the buildings it protected, probably installed after Brennan took over the facility. Industrial grade, but bolt cutters didn't care about grade ratings. Granite cut a hole large enough to slip through, holding the fence open, while Reaper crawled through, then following behind. They moved along the shadow line of Building B, working their way toward the back entrance of Building C, where Cross's intel said the girls were being held. Granite's phone buzzed one more time. Ellen just turned onto Facility Access Road. Guard post is radioing for instructions. You've got maybe 60 seconds. Granite and Reaper broke into a run, covering the open ground between buildings in a sprint that left both men breathing hard, despite years of staying in fighting shape. They reached the back entrance just as the facility's front gate erupted in chaos. Ellen had driven her Honda Civic straight into the gate without slowing down the impact, buckling the gate, and deploying her airbag, but not stopping the car. She crashed through into the compound proper and slammed on the brakes in the middle of the courtyard, then climbed out of the smoking vehicle with a baseball bat in her hands. Every guard on the facility perimeter turned toward this unexpected threat. Granite could hear them shouting into radios, trying to figure out who this woman was and what she wanted. In the confusion, no one noticed 2 men in leather vests slipping through the back door of Building C. Inside the building smelled like industrial cleaner, trying to cover something worse. Granite and Reaper moved through corridors lit by emergency lighting, following Cross's floor plan toward the basement stairs. They'd made it halfway there when a guard rounded the corner and froze hand, going for his weapon. Reaper was faster. He closed the distance in 3 strides and hit the guard with a punch that lifted him off his feet and put him down unconscious before he could draw. Reaper caught the falling body and dragged it into a storage closet, taking the guard's radio and weapon. 2 more guards coming up the stairs, Reaper said, listening to the radio chatter. Granite pulled his .45 and chambered a round. Then we go through them. They hit the basement stairs at a run, just as 2 guards reached the top coming up. The lead guard got his weapon halfway out of its holster before Granite's fist connected with his jaw and sent him tumbling backward down the stairs. The second guard managed to draw and fire the shot, going wide and hitting concrete before Reaper's boot caught him in the stomach and doubled him over. Granite and Reaper thundered down the stairs into the basement proper, and what they found there made Granite's blood run cold. Cages. 18 chain link cages arranged in 2 rows, each one holding a girl between 14 and 19 years old. Some cowered in the back corners. Some pressed against the chain link with desperate eyes. Some just sat numbly like they'd given up, hoping for rescue. In the third cage on the left, blonde hair matted and face bruised, but eyes still defiant, was Lily Wilder. Lily Wilder's eyes met Granite's across 20 feet of concrete in chain link, and for one frozen moment, neither of them moved. She looked smaller than her 17 years, thinner than the school photo Ellen carried, with bruises yellowing on her cheekbones and a split lip that hadn't fully healed. But her eyes held something Granite recognized from his own mirror. On the worst days after Sarah died, a kind of furious determination not to break no matter what they did to her. Reaper was already moving, pulling bolt cutters from his pack and attacking the lock on the nearest cage. The girl inside, maybe 16 with dark hair and scared eyes, pressed herself against the back wall. "We're getting you out," Reaper said quietly, his voice gentle in a way that seemed impossible for someone who'd killed a man with his bare hands 6 hours ago. "Your family sent us. You're going home." The lock snapped and the cage door swung open. The girl didn't move. "It's okay," Reaper continued, holding out his hand. "We're not going to hurt you. But we need to go now before more guards come." Footsteps thundered on the floor above them. Voices shouting orders. The facility was mobilizing faster than they'd anticipated. Granite reached Lily's cage and their eyes locked again through the chain link. "Your mother's name is Ellen. She wears a bracelet that matches yours. She never stopped looking for you." Lily's face crumpled and tears cut tracks through the grime on her cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. "We're Iron Crossing," MC Granite said, working the bolt cutters on her lock. "Ellen sent us to bring you home." The lock broke. Granite pulled the cage door open and Lily stumbled out, her legs unsteady, like she'd forgotten how to stand without bars around her. Granite caught her before she fell, steadying her with hands that had held his own daughter the same way 21 years ago, in a different basement in a different city. "Can you walk?" he asked. Lily's voice came out hoarse from disuse. "I can run." "Good, because that's what we're about to do." The other girls were emerging from their cages now as Reaper worked his way down the line with brutal efficiency, snapping locks like they were made of paper. Some girls moved quickly, understanding that this was their only chance. Others seemed catatonic, broken by weeks or months of captivity. A girl who looked older than the rest, maybe 19 with haunted eyes and a scar across her collarbone, took charge of organizing them. "Everyone who can walk helps someone who can't," she ordered, her voice carrying authority earned through suffering. "We stay together. We move fast. Nobody gets left behind." "What's your name?" Granite asked her. "Maya. Maya Cordova. I've been here 8 months. I know how this place works. The guards will come down those stairs with guns, and they won't care about taking us alive anymore if they think we're escaping." "Then we don't go up the stairs," Granite said. He pulled out his phone and checked Cross's floor plan. "There's a loading dock at the north end of the basement. Service entrance for deliveries. It leads directly outside. That door's always locked from the outside," Maya said. "Heavy security." Cross Granite spoke into his phone. "North service entrance, building C, basement. Can you unlock it remotely?" Cross's voice came back tinny but clear through the speaker. "Give me 30 seconds. "We don't have 30 seconds, Reaper said, listening to the radio he'd taken from the unconscious guard. "They're sending everyone down here. We've got maybe 2 minutes before this basement is flooded with armed men." Granite made a decision. "Maya, get these girls to that service door and wait for my signal. Reaper and I are going to buy you time." "How?" Reaper asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Same way we always do," Granite replied. "We make ourselves the more interesting target." They moved in opposite directions. Granite heading for the stairs, they'd come down while Reaper positioned himself near a secondary access corridor that led to the building's main level. The 18 girls shuffled toward the north end of the basement, some supporting others, Maya at the front, and Lily helping a younger girl who looked barely 14. Granite reached the base of the stairs just as Boots hammered down from above. He raised his .45 and fired 3 shots up the stairwell, not aiming to kill, but to make the guards think twice about rushing down blind. The boots stopped. Voices conferred. Someone radioed for backup. Cross Granite said quietly into his phone, "Tell me you're in that door." "Working on it, boss. Their security system is more sophisticated than Vaughn indicated. I need another minute." Granite fired 2 more shots up the stairwell, then moved to a support pillar that gave him cover from multiple angles. He ejected the magazine, checked the remaining rounds, slapped it back in. 11 shots left. Not enough if this turned into a prolonged firefight. Reaper had attracted his own attention in the side corridor, the sound of shouting and return fire echoing through the basement. Granite couldn't see his brother's position, but he could hear the distinctive boom of whatever weapon Reaper had acquired, regular as a metronome, each shot followed by the sound of men diving for cover. "Boss, we've got a problem." Reaper's voice came through Granite's earpiece. "They're trying to flank through the mechanical room. I can hold them for maybe another minute, but then they're going to get past me." "Then hold them for a minute," Granite replied. "Cross is almost through the door. The guards in the stairwell tried again, three of them rushing down in a coordinated assault that suggested military training. Granite let them get halfway down before opening fire, his shots precise and controlled. One guard took a round in the leg and went down screaming. The other two retreated back up the stairs, dragging their wounded companion. That bought another 30 seconds. Cross's voice crackled through Granite's phone. "Doors open. Get those girls out now," Granite keyed his radio. "Maya, move. Doors unlocked. Get everyone through and keep running. Don't stop for anything." He risked a glance toward the north end of the basement and saw the service door swing open on heavy hinges, gray pre-dawn light spilling through. Maya pushed through first, making sure the door stayed open, and the other girls followed in a stream of desperate humanity, some running, some limping, all of them heading toward freedom with everything they had left. Lily was near the back of the group, still helping the younger girl, when she stopped and looked back at Granite. Their eyes met across the basement, and she mouthed two words he could read clearly even at this distance. "Thank you." Then she was through the door and gone into the dawn, and Granite felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't felt since Sarah died, a sense that maybe, just maybe, some debts could be repaid even if the original loss could never be undone. Reaper Granite called. "Girls are clear. Time to go." "Copy that," Reaper responded. "See you on the other side." Granite laid down covering fire on the stairwell, burning through his remaining rounds to keep the guards pinned, then turned and ran for the service door. Behind him he heard Reaper's weapon boom twice more, then silence, then the sound of boots running in his direction. They burst through the service door, together into the pale light of morning, the desert air cold and clean after the basement's stale atmosphere. Ahead of them, 18 girls were running toward the hole in the fence that Granite and Reaper had cut, Maya leading them like a general shepherding troops through hostile territory. Behind them, guards poured out of the service door, weapons raised. "Keep running," Granite shouted to the girls. "Don't look back." Then he and Reaper turned to face the 2 men against 8, and Granite's 45 clicked empty. The tableau held for one frozen second, guards, raising weapons. Granite and Reaper braced for violence that couldn't be avoided. Everyone calculating odds that didn't favor anyone except the people with bullets left in their guns. Then the dawn exploded with the scream of sirens and the thunder of vehicles, and 4 FBI Suburbans crashed through the facility's already damaged front gate with all the subtlety of an orbital strike. Agents poured out in full tactical gear, rifles to shoulders, spotlights cutting through the morning haze, megaphones blaring commands that no one could ignore. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. FBI, everyone on the ground now." The guards froze, looking between the FBI and Granite and Reaper, and the escaping girls trying to decide which threat was more immediate. 2 of them made the smart choice and dropped their weapons, hands up, getting on their knees. The other 6 decided to fight, which was the last decision they ever got to make poorly. The FBI didn't give them a chance to fire. Rubber bullets and taser rounds dropped 4 of them in the first volley. The remaining 2 managed to squeeze off shots that went wild before they too went down under a weight of non-lethal force that nevertheless left them unconscious and bleeding. The lead agent approached Granite and Reaper, her weapon lowered, but not holstered, her expression unreadable behind tactical eyewear. "Jack Morrison," she said. "You look like you've had an interesting morning," Jennifer Granite replied, recognizing her voice even through the years that had changed her face from young agent to senior supervisor. "Thanks for the dramatic entrance." SSA Jennifer Kwan pulled off her eyewear and studied Granite with eyes that had seen too much and hadn't looked away. "Your tech guy sent me everything 2 hours ago. Took me 90 minutes to assemble a team and get authorization. Looks like I was almost too late." "You were right on time," Granite said. "Girls are headed for the fence line. They're scared and traumatized, and they've been through hell. They need medical attention and someone who's not carrying a gun to tell them they're safe." "Already have medical en route," Kwan said. She keyed her radio and issued orders that sent half her team after the fleeing girls with instructions to provide aid and comfort rather than detention. She turned back to Granite. "Where's Marcus Brennan?" "Getting patched up at a church on 5th Street in Ridgemont," Granite said. "He took a round in the shoulder during an ambush by what we think were buyers trying to eliminate him before he could talk. He's wounded but alive and ready to make a deal if you're offering." "Oh, I'm offering," Kwan said grimly. "Full immunity for full cooperation. Names, dates, financial records, buyer identities, everything. He gives me the whole network, or he goes to trial for trafficking and racketeering and about 40 other charges that'll put him away until he's 90. He'll deal, Granite said. Kyle's a survivor first and foremost. He'll trade everyone he knows to save himself, Good Kwan said. She looked past Granite toward where her agents were gathering the escaped girls, providing blankets and water, and speaking in gentle tones that suggested training specifically for this kind of situation. 18 victims recovered. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot better if we'd found them sooner, Granite replied. Kwan studied him for a long moment. You know this is going to be complicated. Technically, you assaulted Derek Vaughn, broke into a secured facility engaged in gunfire with security personnel. The county prosecutor is going to want charges. Then the county prosecutor can explain to 18 families why he's charging the people who saved their daughters. Granite said flatly, I'll take my chances with a jury. Won't come to that, Kwan assured him. I'm writing this report, and my report is going to say that you were operating as confidential informants under FBI supervision, which technically becomes true the moment I say it is. Appreciate that, Granite said. Don't appreciate it yet, Kwan replied. You and your club are going to give me everything you know about every trafficking operation you've encountered in the past decade. Every whisper, every rumor, every case that didn't make sense. You're going to help me build a network map that goes beyond Brennan. This isn't over just because we shut down one facility. It's never over. Granite agreed. But we stopped it here. That counts for something. It counts for a lot, Kwan said quietly. More than you know. An agent approached and spoke quietly to Kwan, who listened and nodded. They found Derek Vaughn at the motel, Kwan told Granite. He's in custody and already talking. Between him and Brennan, we're going to dismantle this operation completely. How many, Granite asked? Total victims over the years. Kwan's expression darkened. Based on preliminary financial records, we're estimating 60 to 70 girls over 12 years. We've identified about 40 of them so far. The rest are still missing or dead, 60 to 70, Granite repeated, and the number hit him like a physical blow. All those families, all those girls who should have grown up to have normal lives. We'll find them, Kwan said. However long it takes, we'll find them all, and we'll bring them home, or at least give their families closure. Sarah Morrison, Granite said quietly. 2004 to 2006. Phoenix. Was she part of this network? Kwan pulled out her phone and made notes. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I'll look into it. If there's a connection, I'll find it. Granite nodded, not trusting his voice. Go home, Jack Kwan said gently. Get some rest. I'll need full statements from you and your brothers tomorrow, but for now, just go home. Can't, Granite said. Still got one thing left to do. He walked away from the FBI perimeter toward where the girls were being gathered, medical personnel, checking them over, social workers arriving to provide immediate support. He found Lily sitting on the back bumper of an ambulance, wrapped in a thermal blanket, drinking water from a bottle she held with shaking hands. Ellen's car was parked nearby, front end, crumpled from her collision with the gate airbag deployed, but Ellen herself was nowhere to be seen. Granite approached Lily slowly, giving her time to see him coming, not wanting to startle someone who'd spent 3 weeks learning that men meant danger. Your mother's looking for you, Granite said. Lily looked up at him with eyes that had aged years in 3 weeks. Where is she? Probably terrorizing FBI agents trying to find out which girl is you, Granite replied. Come on, let's reunite you two before she starts a riot. They found Ellen in the center of a cluster of agents, her voice rising with each word, baseball bat still in her hand, despite 3 agents trying to gently suggest she put it down. My daughter is here somewhere, and I'm not leaving until I see her. Ellen was saying, her voice cracking. Her name is Lily Wilder, 17 years old. Blonde hair, green eyes. I have a picture, I have her medical records. I have DNA if you need it. Just please, please tell me if she's here. Mom, Lily called out. Ellen turned so fast she nearly fell. Her eyes found Lily across 30 feet of desert scrubland and FBI vehicles, and the baseball bat dropped from nerveless fingers as she started running. They collided in the middle of the clearing. Ellen's arms wrapping around her daughter with enough force to lift her off the ground. Both of them sobbing so hard that neither could speak, just holding on to each other like they could merge back into one person if they squeezed hard enough. Granite watched from a distance, giving them space, and felt wetness on his own cheeks that he hadn't cried since Susan's funeral. Reaper appeared beside him, also watching, not bothering to hide his tears. We did good today, Reaper said quietly. We did what needed doing. Granite replied, that's not the same as good. Close enough, Reaper said. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning chill, watching mother and daughter hold each other and cry out 3 weeks of accumulated fear and pain and desperate hope. Other girls found their families as word spread, and parents arrived, more reunions playing out across the clearing. But Granite only had eyes for Ellen and Lily because they were the reason this had all started. The bracelet, and the question and the connection between a mother's love and a stranger's recognition of shared loss. Eventually, Ellen looked up and found Granite watching. She mouthed the same words Lily had said in the basement. "Thank you." Granite nodded once, then turned and walked back toward where his motorcycle waited behind the abandoned warehouse. Reaper followed without question, and together they retrieved their bikes and rode away from the Ashford facility as FBI vehicles continued to arrive and the machinery of justice began its slow grind. They made it half a mile down the road before Granite's phone rang. Hawk's name on the screen. "Boss, we've got a situation," Hawk said without preamble. "Brennan's bleeding out. Preacher stopped the arterial bleeding, but he needs a hospital, and he needs it 10 minutes ago." "Where are you?" Granite asked. "Still at the church. FBI's not here yet. Brennan's saying he won't deal until he talks to you personally." "I'm 5 minutes out," Granite said. "Keep him alive." They pushed the bikes hard back toward Ridgemont, the morning traffic starting to build, but still light enough that they could weave through it without slowing much. The church appeared on 5th Street, a small building that had been abandoned by its congregation years ago, but which Iron Crossing maintained as a safe house and meeting place. Inside, Preacher had converted the altar area into a makeshift operating room, medical supplies spread across tables that had once held communion wine and wafers. Marcus Brennan lay on a gurney that had probably been borrowed from the same hospital that Preacher had once worked for, his face pale and his breathing shallow, but his eyes still sharp. Jack Brennan said as Granite entered, "We need to talk." "FBI's on their way," Granite replied. "You'll have plenty of time to talk." "Not about the deal," Brennan said. "About Sarah." Granite stopped moving. The church went very quiet. "What about Sarah? I need you to understand something before I make this deal with Quan." Brennan said, his voice weak but determined. "I need you to know that I tried to save her. When we raided that house in Phoenix and found her there, I tried." His voice caught, and he had to stop gathering strength. "She was so scared, Jack. So broken. And I looked at her, and I saw my own daughter, the one I never had, because the job took everything. I tried to get her out before things went bad. I called for medical. I held her hand while she died. I sat with her body until you arrived because I couldn't stand the thought of her being alone." "Then how did you end up running the same kind of operation that killed her?" Granite asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Because I couldn't save her," Brennan said simply. "And after that, I couldn't save anyone. The system broke me, Jack. Showed me that all the good intentions in the world don't mean shit when there's too much money involved and too many powerful people who want things to stay broken." "So you joined them," Granite said. "I stopped fighting them," Brennan corrected. "There's a difference. I didn't start this network. I inherited it from someone else when I moved to Nevada. And I kept it running because the alternative was someone worse taking over, someone who would hurt the girls more than necessary, someone who would kill them instead of selling them." "You're trying to tell me you were the lesser evil," Granite said. "I'm telling you I made choices I can't take back," Brennan replied. "And I'm telling you that even though I became a monster, I never forgot that 17-year-old girl dying in my arms in Phoenix. Sarah haunted me every day. Every girl I trafficked, I saw her face. Every transaction, I heard her voice. Every dollar I made, I felt her blood on my hands. If she haunted you so much, why didn't you stop?" Granite asked. "Because I couldn't figure out how to stop without getting killed," Brennan said. "And because I'm a coward who values his own life more than doing what's right. That's the truth, Jack. I'm not looking for redemption. I'm just trying to explain how a man who tried to save your daughter ended up destroying so many others." Granite stood there looking at the man who had saved his life in Vietnam, the man who had held Sarah as she died, the man who had spent 12 years selling girls into slavery. All those versions of Kyle Brennan existing in the same damaged person, none of them quite real enough to capture what he'd actually become. "The deal with Quan," Granite finally said. "You're going to give her everything." "Everything," Brennan agreed. "Names, locations, financial records, buyer lists, everyone I've ever worked with or sold to. I'll burn the entire network to the ground if it means I don't die in prison." "You're still going to prison," Granite pointed out. Minimum security if I cooperate fully, Brennan said. 10 years maybe with good behavior. I can live with that. It's more than I deserve. It's a lot less than you deserve, Granite corrected. But if it means 60 other girls get found and brought home, then I'll live with it too. Sirens announced the arrival of FBI vehicles outside the church. Quan entered with 2 agents and a medical team, taking in the scene with professional efficiency. Marcus Brennan, she said formally, I'm here to accept your cooperation and place you in protective custody pending full debriefing. I want immunity, Brennan said. Full immunity from prosecution in exchange for complete cooperation. That's not how this works, Quan replied. You get a deal. Reduced charges, minimum security placement protection from retaliation. But you're going to answer for what you've done. Brennan looked at Granite one last time. Fair enough, he said. Let's make this right. The medical team loaded him onto a real stretcher and carried him out to an ambulance, FBI agents flanking him on both sides. Quan stayed behind studying Granite with an expression he couldn't quite read. He told you about Sarah, Quan said. It wasn't a question. He told me he tried to save her, Granite confirmed. I don't know if I believe him. I was there, Quan said quietly. At the Phoenix raid, young agent first year standing outside the house while the tactical team went in. I saw Brennan carry Sarah out. I saw him try to revive her. I saw him break down when she died. Whatever else he became in that moment, he was trying to save her. Then he failed, Granite said. And he spent the next 20 years making the same thing happen to other people's daughters. Yes, Quan agreed. He did. But he's going to help us stop it now. That doesn't erase what he did, but it might prevent some of it from happening again. She turned to leave, then paused. There's going to be fallout from this, Jack. County prosecutor is already talking about charging you. Sheriff's department is in chaos with Brennan gone. Local news is going to make this into a circus. You ready for that? I've been ready for worse, Granite replied. I believe you, Quan said. Stay available. I'll be in touch. She left and Granite was alone in the church with Hawk and Reaper and Preacher, the morning sun streaming through stained glass windows that turned the light into fractured rainbows across the floor. What now? Boss Hawk asked. Now we go home, Granite said. Get some rest. Then we start figuring out what comes next. They rode back to Morrison's Motors in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. The garage looked exactly as they'd left it 12 hours ago. But somehow everything felt different, like the world had shifted on its axis during the night and hadn't quite settled back into place. Cross was waiting for them, laptop open, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the wreckage of an all-night intel session. Boss, we need to talk about something I found in Brennan's financial records, Cross said without preamble. Can it wait? Granite asked tiredly. No. Cross said, his expression grave. It can't. He turned the laptop so Granite could see the screen rows of transactions dating back over a decade, highlighted entries that all shared certain commonalities. Sarah Morrison, Cross said quietly, pointing to a specific entry. Phoenix 2004. Listed here as inventory that was damaged during extraction. No sale completed, total loss. Granite's vision blurred and he had to grip the edge of the workbench to stay upright. She was part of Brennan's network even back then. Not his network, Cross corrected, but a network he was already working with while still FBI. The operation that took Sarah was connected to the same organization Brennan eventually took over. He didn't lie about trying to save her, but he'd already been dirty for years before that happened. So he saw Sarah die and it didn't stop him. Granite said, it didn't change anything. It changed him from someone who thought he could work both sides to someone who went all in on the wrong side, Cross said. Guilt pushed him deeper instead of pulling him out. Granite stood there staring at the financial records, at the line item that reduced his daughter's death to an accounting notation, and felt something fundamental break inside him that he'd been holding together through sheer force of will for 21 years. He walked out of the garage without a word, climbed on his motorcycle, and rode into the desert until he found a place where the silence was complete and the horizon stretched forever in all directions. He sat on the bike for a long time, Sarah's camera in his hands, and finally let himself feel everything he'd been postponing since that phone call in 2006 that had changed his life forever. He cried until he had nothing left, then sat in the silence until the sun reached its peak and started falling toward evening. His phone rang multiple times. He ignored it. Messages piled up. He didn't read them. The world could wait. For the first time in 21 years, Jack Morrison let himself stop being Granite and just be a father grieving for his daughter. When he finally rode back to Ridgemont, the sun was setting and the desert had turned the color of dried blood. Morrison's Motors was dark except for a single light in the office. Hawk sat inside waiting. Not doing anything, just waiting because that's what brothers did. "You okay, boss?" Hawk asked when Granite walked in. "No," Granite said honestly. "But I will be," Ellen called Hawk said. "Wants to see you. Says Lily wants to say thank you properly now that she's had some sleep and medical attention." "Tomorrow," Granite said. "Tonight I need to be alone with my memories." "Fair enough," Hawk replied. "We'll all be here when you're ready." Granite went home to the small apartment he kept above the garage, barely furnished. Mostly just a place to sleep between jobs. Sarah's camera sat on the bedside table next to the only photo he'd kept from before, a family picture from 1998, before everything fell apart. Jack, Susan, and Sarah all smiling like they had no idea what was coming. He picked up the camera and looked through the viewfinder for the first time in years, framing the photo on the bedside table. The camera clicked in Word as it advanced film that was probably expired and useless by now. But Granite kept taking pictures documenting this moment, because that's what Sarah would have wanted, because photography was about capturing truth even when truth was painful. He took pictures of the sunrise through his window the next morning of the garage as it came to life with his brothers arriving of Ellen's car, pulling up outside with Lily in the passenger seat. He took pictures of the reunion of Lily hugging each of the bikers who'd risked their lives to save her, of Ellen, shaking hands with men she'd been taught to fear, and finding them to be exactly what they'd claimed, protectors who kept their promises. 3 months later, Granite stood in a courtroom and watched Marcus Brennan plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony that brought down trafficking networks across 4 states. Brennan got 12 years minimum security. Derek Vaughn got 15 with no deal because he tried to run after initially cooperating. 27 other arrests followed, from local deputies to international buyers, the whole rotten structure collapsing once the FBI pulled the right thread. 6 months after that, Iron Crossing MC formalized their partnership with the FBI's trafficking task force, becoming paid consultants who brought street-level intelligence that conventional agents couldn't access. The arrangement was unusual and controversial, but it worked. 17 more girls recovered in the first year, 23 in the second. The numbers added up to lives saved and families reunited, and that was enough to justify whatever compromises had been made to achieve it. Vincent Castellano Hawk was found dead one morning, 3 months after the Ashford raid, sitting in his chair at Morrison's Motors, with a peaceful expression and no pulse. "Heart attack," the coroner said. "Clean and quick, no suffering." They buried him with full club honors, 200 bikers from across the country paying respects to a man who'd lived by their code and died having made a difference. Granite spoke at the funeral, his voice steady despite the grief. Hawk believed that brotherhood meant sacrifice, that protecting the innocent was worth whatever cost. He died knowing we'd saved 18 girls together. He died knowing we'd started something that would save more. If you'd offered him more years in exchange for letting those girls stay captive, he'd have told you to go to hell. That's who he was. That's who he'll always be in our memory. Ellen and Lily attended the funeral, standing near the back, and afterward, Ellen approached Granite with an envelope. "Lily wanted you to have this," Ellen said. Inside was a drawing clearly done by someone with artistic talent, showing 4 bikers on motorcycles riding towards sunrise, a chain of 18 girls running behind them free. At the bottom, Lily had written, "Thank you for teaching me that some chains are meant to be broken, and some men are meant to be the ones who break them." Granite folded the drawing carefully and put it in his vest pocket next to Sarah's camera. "Tell her thank you," he said, "and tell her that every time we save another girl, I'll think of her and remember why we do this." "Lily's still struggling," Ellen said quietly. "Nightmares, panic attacks, can't be alone with men she doesn't know. The therapist says it'll take years, but she's alive to have those years," Granite pointed out. "That's more than some get. Because of you," Ellen said. "Because of Hawk," Granite corrected, "and Reaper, and Cross, and Preacher, and you driving your car through a gate with nothing but a baseball bat and mother's fury. We all saved her together." Ellen touched the bracelet on her wrist, the one that matched the bracelet Lily still wore every day. "I'll never be able to repay what you did for us." "Then don't try," Granite said. "Just live, both of you. Live and be happy, and make sure Lily knows that surviving isn't the same as healing, but both are possible if you keep fighting. 2 years after Ashford Granite took his first photograph with Sarah's camera, that wasn't an act of grief or guilt. He photographed Lily Wilder walking across the stage at UC Davis, receiving her acceptance into their veterinary program, Ellen in the audience crying happy tears. The photo came out overexposed because the film was 20 years expired, but you could still see Lily's smile, still see the hope that had survived everything they tried to break in her. Granite framed that photo and hung it in Morrison's Motors, next to photos of all the other girls they'd saved, a wall of hope in a world that tried hard to crush it. 83 girls recovered in 3 years of partnership with the FBI. 83 families reunited. It wasn't enough to make up for Sarah or Hawk or all the years of loss and guilt, but it was something. It was enough to keep riding. The last scene played out on a morning that looked like the morning it had all started, cold and clear, with the desert stretching forever. Granite stood at Sarah's grave in Phoenix, older now, and more scarred, but somehow lighter than he'd been in decades. "Sarah, I saved 83 girls," he said to the stone. "Still not enough. Will never be enough. But I'm trying, and I think maybe you'd be proud of that." He pulled out her camera and took one final photograph, the sunrise over her grave, the desert coming alive with light. The camera clicked in word and went still, the last frame of ancient film finally used. Granite walked back to his motorcycle where Reaper and Cross and Preacher waited, the diminished brotherhood that had survived when Hawk hadn't, still riding together, still fighting the good fight. Boss got a call from Quan. Cross said, "Missing girl in Idaho, 16 years old. Mother says police won't listen." "How long's she been gone?" Granite asked. 4 days. "Then we better move," Granite replied. "Clock's always running." They mounted their bikes and fired the engines, 3 men on a mission that would never truly end, because evil was eternal and justice required constant vigilance. But they'd learned something in the years since Ashford, something that made the endless fight bearable. Every girl saved was a small victory against the darkness. Every family reunited was proof that love could survive even when hope seemed impossible. Every mile ridden was a testament to the idea that broken people could still choose to protect others from being broken the same way. Iron Crossing MC rode north toward Idaho, toward another desperate mother and another missing daughter, toward another chance to do what the system couldn't or wouldn't. Behind them, the sun climbed higher over the desert, burning away the morning chill, illuminating a world that contained both unspeakable evil and extraordinary grace. Granite rode at the front, as always, Sarah's camera in his vest and Lily's drawing in his pocket, Hawk's memory riding beside him like a ghost that refused to be laid to rest. The engine beneath him was the same one he'd ridden for 30 years, maintained and repaired so many times that almost every part had been replaced, but somehow still the same bike. Because continuity wasn't about original components, it was about purpose maintained across time. They disappeared into the distance. 3 shadows on the endless highway, the rumble of their engines fading but never quite gone, a promise that somewhere out there, someone was still fighting, still refusing to let evil win unopposed. The road stretched forever ahead, and they rode it together, brothers bound not by blood, but by choice, protectors, serving not for glory, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that tonight, somewhere, a girl would go to sleep safe because they'd refused to look away. That was enough. That had to be enough. Because in the end, being enough was all anyone could hope to achieve against odds that never stopped being terrible and hope that never stopped being necessary. The ride continued.